Hey there, let's quickly write few more codes on C++ functions. The first statement says that write a C++ code to do all arithmetic operations on the two numbers. So let's quickly get started with the first statement. Using namespace std. Cool, then let's create a main function. By the way, namespace is our next module, right? So in the next module, we are going to learn about namespaces. Cool. So what the statement is saying, we have to do all the arithmetic operations on two given numbers. So let's create two variables over here. So let me write int number 1, int number 2. Okay, let's take the input from the user. So let's prompt the user to enter two number. Cool. So after reading this prompt, user will enter two numbers. So let's capture them. Cool. So now user will enter two numbers, right? So once we get these two numbers, we have to perform all the arithmetic operations on them. And as this video is under functions module, we'll have to do it using functions. Okay, now this is very simple code. There is no logic involved, but I just want to tell you about one concept. That's why I'm taking this statement, right? So let's create a function. Let's name it as arithmetic. Okay, it will take two inputs, that is int. Now just tell me what will be its return type. Okay, the arithmetic function is taking two inputs of type integer. Now what are the arithmetic operations? Let's say we have to perform addition, we have to perform subtraction, division and multiplication. Let's say we have to perform these four arithmetic operations. So the return value, we can say if we add two integers, it will be int, right? If we add two, or if we subtract two numbers, then it will be again integer value. If we multiply two integers, again it will be, or the result will be integer. So what we can do, we can write return type of this function as int. Cool. So we have created a function arithmetic, we have declared it. Okay, and now let's start with its definition. So let me write its definition over here. So let's say we are calling first number as number 1 and second number as number 2. Cool. Now let's find the sum. So what will be the sum? It will be, let me write something like this. Okay, so this is sum. Let's write, this is subtraction. Let's write number 1 into number 2. This is multiplication, and also return number 1 divided by number 2. This is division. Okay, so in this way we are performing all the arithmetic operation. The question is whether this code will work, whether we can write code like this, whether we can write multiple return statement, and whether we'll get return value of all the return statements. So let's quickly see. So for that, let's call this arithmetic function. Let's pass two numbers to it. So number 1, number 2. And okay, now let's say, or let me just quickly tell you, you can return only one value from the function. You cannot return multiple value. Okay, so this syntax is not going to work. Okay, so if I write cout arithmetic number 1, number 2, and if we run this code, let's quickly run this. In this case, my file name is 06 programs2.cpp. okay, it is showing an error. Arithmetic was not declared in this scope, so maybe our spelling is not matching. So actually this is correct spelling. Okay, why it is giving us an error? Because declaration spelling was different than definition spelling. Okay, so that's why when we were directly calling it, the compiler was not having any idea about what is this arithmetic, right? So that's why we need to give its declaration. So now we are giving proper declaration. So let's compile it. It has got compiled, and let's quickly execute it. So let's enter numbers as 10 and 20. You can see we are getting only 30 as the output. we are not getting subtraction as well as multiplication as well as division. Okay, so even if you are writing multiple return statement, only the first return statement or the return statement which is at the first position will get executed, and once this return statement gets executed, rest of the code will not execute. So even these return statement won't really matter, right? They will not execute, and that's why this is totally invalid syntax, or this is not invalid syntax. Actually syntactically it is correct, there is no mistake, but this statement actually makes no sense because they will never execute, because there is directly one return statement present over here. Now let's see, can we write something like this? In single return statement, can we write something like this, like returning multiple value by comma, by giving comma? Okay, let's quickly see whether this works or not. See, syntactically it is working because the program has got compiled. Now let's quickly run this code. So let's enter the same numbers 10 and 20. You can see that we are getting output as 0. Now what is this 0? To understand this, let me enter few different numbers. So let me enter numbers as 20 and 10. So in this case we are getting output as 2. So what is this 2? This 2 is nothing but division of number 1 and number 2. Okay, so whenever you are writing something like this, that is return something comma something comma something, what is happening? The last value is getting returned. Okay, so whenever you write list of values separated by comma, the last value will get returned. All right, but the thumb rule is only one value will get returned from the function. You cannot return multiple values from a function. All right, so I hope you are very clear with this idea that you cannot return multiple values from a function. So how we can handle this then? How we can deal with this? How we can write a function which will return us a value of addition, subtraction, multiplication, division? So the simple way is to write 4 separate functions. Actually write 4 different functions, one for addition, one for subtraction, one for division, and one for multiplication. This is the easiest way. Okay, and then there are different ways as well, right? So you can take one more like this is one way, but it's on you, right? So let me write one way like this, or let's take this. Okay, I am passing third argument to the function, that is operation. Okay, so if the operation, or let's write switch case statement. So I am passing this operation in switch. Now let's have a case label as plus character. So if my case label is plus, in that case I am going to return number 1 plus number 2. Okay, now in this case, whenever you are writing return statement, you don't need to write break statement after this, because when this return statement will get execute, we are anyway breaking directly, or we are anyway terminating that function. Okay, so break statement after this return statement don't really make any sense. Okay, so we don't need to write a break statement. So let's write case minus, and here let's return number 1 minus number 2. Let's have another case for star, and let's return, or let me just move this line to the top. To move the line to the top, you can use alt then and up arrow in VS Code, right? On Mac, I don't remember the shortcut now. No, I don't remember the shortcut key for moving the line to top in Mac. I guess in Linux also this is same, right? You have to use alt and up arrow. And let's have a default case in case by mistakenly some programmer is passing some different character, then we'll just return let's say -1. -1 will indicate that it is something incorrect value. Okay, or let's not have default. Cool. Now while calling a function, we need to pass one more argument, that is a character. So, and it is going to be operation. So whenever you will have to perform plus operation, you will supply plus. Whenever you will have to perform minus, you will supply minus. Same for multiplication and division. Cool. So you can do it like this. And now if I run this code, you can see if I enter 10 and 20, you can see it is giving me all the answers. Okay. Maybe after this we should write ENDL. See, this ENDL is very important, because without that your code is not going to look good. Your output is not going to look good. So let's clear the terminal. Let's compile it again and let's run it. Let's enter 10 and 20. You can see we are getting output as 30, which is addition of 10 and 20, then minus 10, which is 10 minus 20, then 200, which is 10 into 20, and then 0, which is 10 divided by 20, as it is integer division. So I hope you are very clear with the first statement. Okay, you can just try this code on your machine. You can understand all the things. It is quite easy. I will say it is very easy. Now what is the next statement? We have to find GCD and LCM of given two numbers, where GCD is greatest common divisor and LCM is least common multiplier. Before writing this code, let me just comment the code that we have written so far over the top. So let's comment this out. Cool, and let's get started. So let's include header files. Then let's say include namespace. Let's start with the main function. Cool. Let's take two inputs, two numbers, number 1 and number 2. Let's take it from user. So let's ask user to enter them. Let's write Cin number 1, number 2. Okay, so now we will have two numbers. Now we want to find GCD and LCM of two numbers. So let's create two different functions, one for finding GCD and another for finding LCM. Okay, so let's create a function for finding GCD. Now GCD is going to be an integer number. Okay, so the function GCD will return us an integer number. So let's write return type as int, then function name as GCD. It will take two inputs, that is int comma int. Then another LCM function which is going to return integer value, and it will again take two numbers of type int. Now why I said declarations are good? Because declarations help programmer to know about the function. Okay, they help programmer to understand what function is taking as the input, how many inputs it is taking, and what it is going to return as the output, or what type of output it is returning. We don't need to see the entire body of the function. That's why we programmer prefer writing declarations on the top of main function, and we write definitions of the function after the main function, so that if I just want to know what this GCD needs in the input, I will just see the declaration. I don't need to see the big function with big function body. Okay, I'll just see this declaration and I'll get to know that this function needs two input of integer type and it is going to return me integer value. We should write this name in such a way that it should be self-explanatory, right? So this name suggests me that this function is going to give me GCD of two numbers. Okay, so let's start defining this function over here. So let's write int GCD. Let's take two inputs, so let's write in number 1 and number 2, and let's write another function for LCM, which will again take two numbers, number 1 . Cool. So these are going to be our two functions. Let's start with the GCD logic. Let's see how we can find GCD of any two numbers. GCD is going to be greatest common divisor. Okay, see, this GCD is going to be, let me just write it in comments. See, this GCD is going to be a number which is greater than or equal to 1, because it may happen the two numbers are not actually having any common divisor. So in that case the common divisor will be 1. Okay, because 1 is anyway can divide any number. So the GCD should be or can be greater than equal to 1, and the GCD will always be less than or equal to the minimum of these two numbers. See, GCD will be always greater than or equal to 1, and GCD will be less than the minimum of number 1 and number 2. See, let's say the number 1 is 10 and number 2 is 15. So the greatest common divisor will be always less than 10 because the first number is 10 or the smallest number between these two is 10. So GCD will be obviously less than this 10 number, right? So the GCD will be always less than minimum of these two numbers. So that's why we'll create one more function which will give us minimum between two numbers. So let's write a function called as minimum. It will take two inputs, that is number 1 and number 2. So if number 1 is greater than number 2, it will return number 1, else it will return number 2. Now when you write return statement in if, in that case actually you don't need to write else, because if the if statement executes, then return statement will execute and function will terminate over here. If the return if statement doesn't execute, then you will come over here and then this return statement will execute. So here I'll write return number 2. So the meaning is you don't need to write else statement, because when the execution will go inside this if statement, will return from here. So this statement will never execute, and when we will not enter here, then this statement will execute, which is as good as executing else statement, right? So okay, so now we know that the range of our answer can be between 1 to minimum of number 1 and number 2. Okay, so let's get value of minimum. So let me write m is equal to minimum. Let's call minimum function and let's pass number 1 and number 2 to it. Now in case of minimum, I haven't added its declaration because I just need minimum over here. Okay, I'm not going to use minimum on other places, and the rule says that where you are calling the function, it should be defined or declared before that call. So we are calling minimum over here and it is defined before the call, so that's why we don't really need declaration. Okay, because declarations are optional. Cool. So now we have minimum between these two numbers. So now what we'll do, we will start from the minimum and we'll come back in reverse till 1. We'll divide these two numbers by the number and we'll check whether the number is getting, or both the numbers are getting divisible by say given number. Okay, so let me quickly write a code. So for int I is equal to m, so we are starting with m, that is upper limit, because we have to find greatest common divisor. Okay, so that's why we are coming from top to bottom. So my I is starting from m, my I should be greater than or equal to 1. So till the position or till the point my I is greater than equal to 1, I want to execute this loop, and in each iteration my I will decrement by 1. So I'll write I minus minus. So I will check if number 1 modulo I, if it is equal to 0, that means I is actually dividing number 1, okay, completely, and number 2 mod I is also equal to 0. That means I is also dividing number 2. That means this I is a common divisor of number 1 and number 2. So in this case we can say return I. So whichever I will divide these two numbers first will get returned. Okay, so this is the simple code for finding GCD. Okay, so let's quickly call this function and let's pass it numbers which are 10 and 15. Let's say, let's see what we get as the output. Oh, okay, we have to pass the numbers which user is entering. So I'll just write number 1 and number 2 over here. Let me close this program. Let's execute it again. So let's write first number as 10 and second number as 15. You can see the GCD that we are getting is 5. 5 is the greatest divisor, that that can divide these two numbers. Let's say my first number is 10 and second number is 20. In this case, GCD is going to be 10 because 10 is the greatest divisor which can divide 10 as well as 20. Cool, let's go for the next one. The next function is finding LCM. Okay, so in case of next function, let's first call this function over here. Here we have to find LCM of two numbers. See, LCM is least common multiplier. Okay, so let's say we have two numbers, that is 10 and 15. So what is LCM of these two numbers? So LCM of these two numbers is going to be 30. LCM is a number which can be divided by both these numbers. Okay, so 30 is the only number or the least number which can be divided by 10 as well as 15, and it is less number. Okay, so what is going to be the minimum value of the LCM? The minimum value of the LCM is going to be maximum between these two numbers. So in this case we have 10 and 15, so minimum value of the LCM is going to be 15. Now why we are taking maximum of these two numbers as the minimum value of LCM? Let's take example of 10 and 20. In case of 10 and 20, what is LCM? LCM is 20 because 20 is a multiplier of 10 as well as 20. And how we are getting this 20? 20 is maximum between these two numbers. So what we'll do, we'll start minimum value of LCM from maximum of these two numbers. So let's write another function to find maximum between these two numbers. So let me just copy paste this function. Let's name it as maximum. It will take two numbers. If okay, there seems to be an issue over here. Yes, in minimum actually I have written wrong condition, because here actually it should be something like this. If number 1 is less than number 2, then we should return number 1, and if number 1, otherwise I should return number 2. Okay, and this is condition for maximum. And even after writing wrong condition, it was giving us correct answer. Okay, that was just by chance, luck by chance, but every time it will not happen, right? That's why a good developer should extensively test his code, right? Cool. So now we have written another function, that is maximum. Let's find maximum over here. So let me write int m is equal to maximum. Let's pass number 1 and number 2 as input. Now once we have maximum in this m, what we'll do, we'll write a for loop. Okay, this for loop will start from m. We have to find now multiplier. Okay, so this will start from m, which can be minimum value of the multiplier. Okay, now we don't know what is going to be the upper limit. We don't know that. So for that, I'm not writing any condition for this loop. I'm not writing any condition. I'm keeping it blank. So that's why I'm keeping it blank and I'm writing next semicolon. Okay, and in each iteration I want this I to increment by 1. I hope you remember from the looping module that in for loop all the things are not compulsory. Okay, all the things in for loop header are not compulsory. You can completely skip all the things. Okay, you can skip initialization, you can skip condition, you can skip increment, decrement. So here I will just check if I can be divisible by number 1 and I can be divisible by number 2. So we'll have to write it something like this. If I mod number 1 equal to 0 and I mod number 2 equal to 0, in that case we'll just return I. Okay, so whenever we are getting I and that I can be divisible by number 1 or can be divided by number 1 and it can be also divided by number 2, in that case we can say that it is the LCM, because we are starting the value of LCM from m, which is maximum of the two numbers. Cool. So let's quickly run this code. So let's enter number as 10 and 20. You can see that LCM is 20 and GCD is 10. So we are getting correct answer. Let's enter number as 10 and 15. In this case we are getting GCD as 5 and LCM as 30. We are getting correct answer.